This is going to be much better. I want to talk today about marking. I want to talk in a way that you can see it. And if you're here, I shouldn't have to convince you why. But marking's kind of a big deal. Defense is the side of the ball in Ultimate that I love to play, and it's what I like to think about. So when I think about a game, I think about how we're going to break down the offense, how we're going to force turnovers and create block situations. I'm going to talk about marking today, but in doing so, I need to make a couple of assumptions. Follow along with me as much as you can, and please ask questions as we go. My assumptions are these. First off, fitness can't be an issue. We can't be talking about marking and have to make decisions based on what we can or can't do because we're out of breath. Fitness has to be a bottom line. We're also talking about high-level Ultimate here. So we're assuming that the offense will take the disc down the field and score unless you stop them, unless you do something to prevent that. We are not talking about the City League team you play on, where given a 7-on-0 situation, they might or might not score. Some of those rules are going to be different. So for here, 7v7, they're going to be tough to stop, and we're assuming good skills on all sides. Person-to-person defense is what I'm going to focus on. I'm not really concerned with zone defense all that much. I feel that once you learn a decent blade, all zone defenses look the same. That might not be true, but I really want to talk about person-to-person D. And also, I tend to talk all in masculine. I'm sorry if that offends anybody. It just helps me go quicker. I mean all of this to be exactly equal in men's and women's. And I'm assuming that you all know the basic fundamentals of marking. Now, I'm also assuming that everybody's basic fundamentals of marking are a little bit different, so when something comes up that you don't understand, throw a hand up. All right, we've been going for 3 minutes already and nobody's asked a question. That's a bad sign, and I expect more by the next 3 minutes. The last thing is, what I talk about has to make sense to you. If, for somebody in this room that's been playing for 1 billion years and knows everything about the game, if I can get one thing out there that even you just wholeheartedly disagree with, and it helps you think about the game in a little different way, I'll have done my job. Hopefully for some of you, I show you something that's interesting or might be able to help your team. But it doesn't matter what I say unless you can convert that to something that makes sense for you. You're not going to do what I say because it sounds good. You're going to do it because you believe it and because it works. Okay, why do we stress marking? At no other point in a game do you have more defensive power than when you are on the mark. You control more field space, and more yardage of the field is under your influence. There are 2 situations we want to talk about. 2 reasons to mark. One is we want to minimize the opponent's strengths. Now, some of this is going to be specifics about your opponent, what they do well. I don't know your opponent, so I can't really speak to that. I will talk about some of my opponents and what my teams have tried to do to combat them in particular, and hopefully those examples will help you. But really, we want to talk about creating turnovers. We want to turn up the pressure whenever possible. We want to get the other team in situations where they have to do something they don't want to do or they don't do well. Okay, this is how I'm going to represent things from the top view. Blue is going to be offense, red is going to be defense, and I want to talk about 2 aspects of mobility on the mark that you may or may not have heard, but hopefully I can shed some light on. A couple of things we're doing on the mark. I play with sockeye. And one thing that we've started to do is, instead of what are you guys' names?
Craig.
Alec. You guys mind helping me? Jump up. Craig, stand like you have a disc. And anybody have a disc in here?
Yeah.
Throw it out. There we go. One of you is on the mark, one of you is not.
Let's make this real.
Okay. So get in a basic mark stance, please. So basic mark stance, facing the thrower, and he has feet essentially shoulder width apart, and he's standing there pretty balanced. Now that's what I call an even foot stance, and what we've started to work with is we've actually started to work with a staggered stance. So having one foot in front of the other. Now why do you do this? Every team, actually that's perfect, thank you, you guys can sit down. Every team you've played with has stressed at some point, probably at a high level, that you want to be able to move in and out from the mark. You want to be able to change the marker-thrower distance. With feet even, it's really hard to do that. We go into a staggered stance, especially on players that draw fouls well, that stretch well, or that really huck well, and we want to be able to move forward and back. Just a little bit of stagger, and then we can be going in and out. And how you decide which foot is a stagger depends on which throw they're better at. So if I am staggered, if a player is facing me, and I'm staggered left foot forward, and they're right-handed, their righty forehand over here is what I'm hoping is weaker, because now I can go for their backhand more, but I can also go in and out. So I'm allowing myself some in and out movement, even though I'm making it harder to cover this forehand. And the in and out movement is going to be important to stopping things like hucks and drawing fouls. Another thing we talk about, nice arrow, in black up here is defender, and I want you to look at the position of his head. Now everybody has seen markers draped and falling over, and when the head goes forward, the weight tends to follow that. And we talk about getting your head back. There's a couple reasons for this. One is you get your head back, and you tend to be in a better movement position to go side to side or forward and backwards. The other reason is with your head back, you can actually see more, and it's not much, but it's a couple more inches. And if you're talking about marking somebody that's either throwing their backhand from here or here, that's the couple inches that decide whether you, if you're back here, whether you block it or whether you're just stabbing a hand out there and hope it. So we talk about head back and using that staggered stance at some point. Okay, other individual techniques. In red, I have a defender here who looks like he's probably going to foul this thrower. He's forward in his stance, he's really aggressive, putting pressure on the forehand. And if you see in the next frame, he's come very far back from that thrower. So in actuality, as he extends to block this throw, he's doing what we call blocking back. He's going away from the thrower. This is especially important on, well, okay, there's two throws, right? Forehand and backhand. Without thinking, yell out which one you need to block back on more. Okay. You're either going to yell forehand or backhand, and it's the one that you think you have to block back on more to avoid fouling that person. Ready, go. Forehand. Okay, I think it's backhand, and the reason I think this, and if you were wrong, according to me, figure out if I'm making sense here, but the backhand, you can really get a lot of extension, and you have more meat of your body in front of the disc. You see a lot of fouls on people reaching sideways and fouling backhands, whereas forehand gets out a little bit quicker, and you can go more sideways. But especially on backhands, we block back to try to get that without fouling. A lot of the things we do are trying to avoid fouling because there are very few situations in which fouling can help you, and even those situations depend on your not having a conscience. We also, and I should make this clear, I think that intentionally fouling, if you remove the spirit of the game aspect, intentionally fouling may be beneficial, but the way I see the game going in 5 or 10 years, that benefit will have been lost to better player training and better skills, and that you will start to see people that foul all the time like you would in a basketball game. They're fouling out, they're hurting their team, and they're not helping the teammates that they're supposedly fouling for. So that's where I think it's going, and blocking back is one of these techniques where you can get more hand blocks and less fouls.
Good question.
Yeah.
Are you focusing for the marking for point blocks or for taking away position on the field? What is the...
Good
so
question.
far the emphasis has been getting point blocks. Is it going to continue that?
Okay. When I look at this marker here, I'm looking at his body, especially his lower back, as really determining what area of the field he's covering. Given that area of the field, we still want to put pressure and get blocks whenever we can. And to get more of those blocks, I think you block back. Now, hopefully that's independent of where he's covering, and I'll talk more about coverage zones later, so we'll get to that. But no matter what you're covering, we want to block more throws and foul less throws. Okay, setting up out of stoppages. You've all marked somebody right after a travel call or a pick call. And the basic thing that you do is you line up and you shake it out and you get up on the mark and you give them a completely neutral blank slate to work with. You are marking them where you want to mark them, and they are free to attack you with any set of moves that they want. And what we started doing is we started to tend out of those stoppages. So when you guys jump up here, anybody? Yeah. Come here. Jeff? Okay. Jeff's holding a forehand, and he's coming out of a stoppage. Now, if I came out in a neutral mark, here I'm in a neutral mark, nothing earned, nothing gained, but out of the stoppage, Jeff has a chance to make eye contact with one of his teammates and maybe look for what is there, depending on the field. Now, what we're going to do is I'm going to tend on his backhand, so I'm going to sit farther over than I would, point my body across at him, and now what I'm going to show him for his first second is I'm going to show him a moving mark. So 3, 2, 1, disc in, I'm coming in here. Now, thank you, Jeff. Now what I've given him is a choice between, he can either try to throw through where my body is, or where my body is obviously going. Who here likes throwing where a body is? Nobody. Well, maybe nobody, but it's not something we do often, which is a good reason to use it. And the other is, who likes throwing somewhere where the person is obviously going to go? This is much more difficult than just looking at a blank slate. We're talking about very good players here that have attack moves on the break. Yeah?
Can you only do the moving thing when you're doing like a straight up mark? But like what if you call a forced flick?
Oh yeah, you're totally right. If I'm in a forced flick here, if this is my neutral mark and I want to tend on his backhand,
Yeah.
I'll come more over than that.
Okay.
Then for the first second, I'll show him this and then go into my mark. You can do it for whatever mark you want to go into. And it's a way of trying to win back that advantage that the offense has because they can sit in that stoppage and make eye contact and see down the field. So I am now making the decision for the thrower. This is what you have. And baiting for blocks. There's two different ways we talk about baiting. And what I mean by baiting is showing the offense an opportunity and then trying to take it away and get a block there or force a bad throw. One way you could do it is, say I want to force my thrower into a low backhand, so I want to force them to throw here. That's the throw I think I have a chance at. Well, I can set up on the mark here, wait for what I think is that throw, and try to go down and beat them. And against good throwers, that's tough to do. But if you can set them up for it, sometimes you can get one. The other thing that we're starting to see, and this is only, and I need to stress this, only against offenses that are so good that you think they will score most of their points unless you do something, is we're starting to see baiting between points. Like we'll go out and we'll show a very good thrower this mark for an entire point, and they may score because of that. But the next point, we might be able to come down and get that because we've shown him one mark and hit him with another. And that kind of baiting between points only mathematically works out, again, if you assume they're going to score 95 or better percent of their points. I don't know the exact math, but what I do know is, if you do this in City League, you're just letting people score. If you do this against very good teams, the very good teams that you either play on or someday might play on, this might be a way to get a D point. You might get a hand block, which is a quick D point in a game where there's only 2 or 3 D points. That could be the difference, and it could be well worth letting them break you earlier in the game. Okay. Throwing zones. If I am marking any given player, as I go to mark, they have all these different places they could release the disc from. And usually, we want to stop as many of those places as we can, but there's going to be some throw zones you cannot stop. And we can choose those throw zones that we can't stop based on other considerations. Not all throws coming out are equal. So in this top picture, we have a player throwing a high release backhand, probably coming out pretty quick. But that throw is not as dangerous downfield. So even though, for me, stopping this spot might be the same as stopping this spot, keeping him going up means downfield they have floatier, slower throws to deal with. It's all, for most good players today, they want to throw about knee to hip high, and if we can keep them out of that range, downfield, maybe we can create more chances to get blocks. For just your average in cut, if the downfielders are having to catch here on, 7 out of 10 catches, it's a lot different than taking 7 out of 10 catches here. Not only in how many times they'll catch that or how many times they'll block it, but what they can then do with that on the next throw. So we want to put pressure on the throw zones that are the best. And in this case, a lot of the times we want to come up to the disc. Now take one hand out here, just hang it out, and I want you to hang it straight out. And the first thing I want you to do is, when I say go, react down and block. Ready? Go. Okay, same thing, we're just sitting out here. And now we want to react up when I say go. Okay, which feels faster?
Oh,
Yeah.
Say it. I heard somebody say up, and that's what I think. And the reason that it's been taught to me as that it's up is because we have developed to be protecting our head and neck. And so that you actually come faster up towards your head and neck than you go down, which doesn't make sense because you think gravity would be the other way around. But we're quicker coming up. So when we go into our mark, we like to think of staying under the disc. Jeff, will you jump up here again? And can I get a disc? Thanks. So as Jeff goes to fake his high release forehand, if I see that's a fake, so go ahead and just hold it up there. I want to stay on that fake under his hand. So most of the time on the mark, I want to be blocking up through the disc or beating it there, but I don't ever want to be coming down on the disc. So if he goes from there to throw over here, and I'm coming down to get to him, that's bad. But I want to be under this disc and coming up to block. And we think that we're a lot more successful staying under the disc whenever possible. In part because we're quicker going up, and in part because even if he gets off these higher throws, that throw zone is less dangerous downfield. Thanks, Jeff. Marking over the top. Yeah.
I think if you're coming up, you also have your thumb in the way, as opposed to going down where it's.
That's a good point. I like it.
Parallel.
Yeah. I like it.
I completely agree with you. Coming up, I still think going down is faster.
Okay.
Thumb is.
I'm going to keep going, and we will argue that later. Good. Marking over the top throws. All the stuff we've been talking about forehand and backhand. We have gotten to the point, or maybe we were there long ago, where there are some players that you will play against that are good enough with an over-the-top throw that you have to learn to mark that. And nobody marks over-the-top throws as well as they do normal throws because those are throws that you see more. You have more experience with. But we've started actually practicing against marking over-the-top throws. Kirk Savage. Thank you. Plays for Furious George. Pretty good forehand, unbelievable scuba, almost no other throw. But I'm serious. I have sat through so many games thinking, oh, it's that scuba again, whatever. We'll get him when he throws a normal throw. Oh, we'll get him when he throws the backhand. And every time, scuba. He's really good at it. He can send it 30 yards downfield where he wants it. Well, you need to adjust. If you're playing against somebody like that, you need to learn how to bring a hand up and actually mark it over the top throw. So this is one thing we drill specifically for this player, but it can apply to whoever you're playing against. And I'm not talking about the guy that can go out there and throw a 60-yard hammer for fun. I'm talking about the player that you play against that puts a 20-yard hammer where they want it consistently enough that it's dangerous. One thing we talk about marking over the top throws is this is one of the few times when we actually talk about encroaching away from our body and going towards the marker, not because we think we're going to stop a lot of these throws by contact, but because as they go up to throw this hammer and they have this hand here, it looks like it's blocking it. And what we want to do is we want to take from those very good over-the-top throwers, is we want to make them go, no, and do something else. You probably won't block a lot of hammers. They're really high. It's tough to stay under that and not give up everything else. But by going forward a little bit and trying to stay in that vision, you can get a good mark on those certain players and make them do something they don't want to do.
Are you allowed to block the vision of...
So, that's a good point. I'm not putting my hand to the eyes to block the vision. I'm putting my hand in where they're looking at their throwing line. So I'm going up for that throw. If they want to throw it right through my hand, they can try, but it makes it look like I'm taller than I actually am. That's a good question. We don't want to cheat. Pressure on live side throws, I actually want to come back to. And piece calls. Now, piece calls I love. And this is a very, I don't know if any of you guys know anything about sockeye, but this is a very sockeye thing. Being on the mark, what we do now is if you touch the disc on a throw, you scream piece. And you scream it like you've never screamed it before. Now, there's two reasons. One is, if somebody gets a piece of a disc, that disc tends to come shorter. And our piece call now means defenders turn your head around and find that thing. So you're not playing great defense and letting the offense come back and catch it. The second reason is you're telling that thrower, hey, guess what? I got a little bit. Next time I'm going to get more. Maybe you make them fake it and do something else next time. So piece calls have been a really important part of how we mark. And they're just fun. First, second marking. This is going to be a key to a lot of the schemes I'm going to talk about later. But stopping continuation. The defender in black here has come all the way over to the break side to really get an arm out there and stop the first available throw. And stopping the swing throw after dumps or stopping the next throw down the break side, stopping continuation is a big part of what we need to do. There's going to be a couple of things that we want to do. One is, and this is probably pretty widespread by now, is that when you are chasing a player who is about to catch the disc, you have a second to take a look. And you can actually see the field down behind you. Now, if Jeff is catching, what's your name?
Devin.
If Devin throws over to Jeff, and I'm trying to stop him from going down this side of the field, I'm running over to stop Jeff, and as he's catching the disc, I can take a look. And we don't talk about taking this look as turn, see what the jerseys are, and try to make sense of it. What we're doing is get the information, and by the time you get to here, maybe it'll mean something to you. So you're actually turning faster than you can think, but just find it, and you'll see, is there somebody over there? Are they way over there so you want to come more around? Is there no one over there and maybe you don't need to go as far? But as you're running to your swing throw, you can take a look. So taking that look has been a big part of how we stop continuation. Finishing your drills. This is kind of a little bit of a rant, but everybody does these drills where you got pairs of offense and defense running around, offense catches it, throws it to the next offense, and then that second offensive player in a 2-on-2, what do they do when they catch that disc? They catch and they jog back to line, right? And what's the defender do? They jog back to line with them. If you take that opportunity to get the offensive player to get the disc, face up to the goal, make a fake, and the defense uses that to mark hard for 1 or 2 seconds, you're going to give yourself 10 to 15 more solid game-like marking practice opportunities per practice, per person. You're looking at hundreds or even thousands more marking opportunities for your team to learn how to mark in those first 2 seconds, when it is most vital. If your guys are just walking back to line, you are losing so much. You're wasting your life. Finish your drill. Yeah, Catherine.
I'm wondering, and I tell the kids over and over and over again, you know, stop the continuation and come set up. And it just kind of always seems it's very hard but not going one ear and not the other. Do you have any drills
Yeah.
to work that?
So 2 things that we do. Same thing, Devin's throwing over to Jeff. We talk about this as a 2-part process. The first thing is that physically, you have to go from a running stride into a defensive stance, right? So we need to take the physical aspect and make a transition. So we're going running stride into marking stance. The second part of it is then we need to catch up. And what I mean by catch up is as this offensive player catches it and they throw a fake or whatever they're going to do, there is a moment of time, at least, when the marker is trying to catch up to them. And what we want to do from there is we want that marker to start winning. We want that marker to start leading and start making the decisions for the throw. So if we can get in here and defensively fake or something to get them out of that chase rhythm, something to get out of so it's just the mark following the thrower. Now we're turning their dump swings into a confused thrower that can't go anywhere with it. So 2 parts is we need the physical part, which we drill. So physically getting into your stance in a balanced way. And the mental part of not just getting onto the mark and starting to flail rapidly, but getting onto the mark and trying to make a decision for the offense. And that's hard to do. I think separating it helps a lot. So doing just the physical part and the mental part of winning back that race. If you are taller and faster and more athletic than everyone, you will be able to just chase a thrower all the way through that mark and probably win some. But the second you want to play somebody that's better or faster or more skilled than you, and that's what you want to do in Elite Ultimate, well, you got to learn how to win that battle and get them back on your terms. So, one way you can do that is ignoring bad first fakes. Everybody has somebody on their team who catches the disc into a swing and just goes like that and starts to play, right? But if you see somebody drop their head or get the disc up here or something weird on their throw where you know they're not going downfield with it, it's time to use that opportunity. So if Jeff gestures wildly on his backhand, I'm going to ignore that and get in here. I'm not covering the fake just to be covering everything he does. If he's not throwing, I'm using that opportunity to steal back in on the mark. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Sorry. When I say that, does that make sense? You guys say?
Yeah.
Okay. So does that make sense?
Yeah.
Okay, good. Still with me. You know what I forgot to talk about in baiting? Is, along with bad first fakes, is you, disc please, somebody? Is you do see a lot of players out there, even on very good teams, that have hitches in their throws. And what I mean by hitches, they want to throw a forehand, they go like this. Everybody know that one? You're thinking of the teammate, right? Or they want to throw their backhand, so they go like that. They turn the disc over. They do something. We actually, if we can find those players, we'll drill for them. Thanks. Specific example, we played a guy from Berkeley when I was in college who every forehand pumped and threw, and we just took 2 or 3 minutes with the guy who would guard him in practice and had somebody set up with a disc, pump and throw, and he'd see the pump and go. See the pump and commit to that forehand. And we got a block out of it. Now, is it worth 3 minutes to get a block in a game? Yeah. It's worth 3 minutes to get a chance at a block in a game. And you might not get it every time, but just to get one, it might be at an important enough moment that it's well worth it. You see a player with a hitch, they have made an error in practicing badly. You can use that against them. Okay, individually, sideline marking. If we're looking at our generic stack and generic force forehand, this is a coverage zone. So I have my trapezoid up here. You'll notice this is not 1/2 of the field. If you play against good teams, no mark can take off a half the field. It's just too much to ask. In fact, this might be optimistic. But we would like to think maybe we could stop that swath of field, and that those other red players can stop the other half of the field and maybe some of the dead side. Now, when you do your marking drill, you run up to the mark, you get in a certain position, you mark. But you don't change those drills based on very much. Like you do that drill, you do 20 of those marks, and you're ready for the game. But if we put the disc over to the sideline and we mark the same way, now we're guarding the bench players who aren't going to catch very many discs. This is the exact same mark. You haven't made any mental adjustment. You are now guarding maybe 80% blank space. I don't think vendors are that valuable. So what we've started to do is on the sideline we go straight up. Much more coverage of the field. This makes sense to everybody?
Yeah.
Okay. This is pretty basic. The next part, which gets fun, is we actually switch that mark around and turn our coverage onto all grass. Now we're not wasting any of our energy on the mark. We're covering almost all of the field, and we're definitely leaving an open lane out there. But we're making it easier for the downfield defenders. And I can tell you there is nothing more gratifying than watching a good offensive player cut break side against a forehand mark and then cut back into live side, only to have this guy try to break it over here. Watch that disc go sailing by him. Because even though you're in a forced flick, you're not regimented into where your body needs to be. Now you're actually guarding field instead of guarding bench. On the other side of the field, sorry, yeah.
Do you still have the defenders in stack forcing the flick side?
There's going to be some adjustment here, but yeah, they're still forcing the flick side. At this point, no one is really responsible for this line here, because the downfield defenders are still on that side of their player, and this guy's still guarding more field. But if they can make, if they can actually make hay here, well, that's a tough place to go. It's better than guarding bench, at least. There's another question.
That's the same one.
Okay.
What's to stop someone from throwing that scuba or hammer over the top there, and then you basically just come up with it?
So, wait, all the way to the goal?
If I pop a 10 or 15 yard scuba or hammer over there, can't they just start to throw it back in?
It's true. Are you talking from where the disc is now?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think even if you, even if you're marking like this or that, you can still throw that hammer over. That doesn't really change the hammer as much. In fact, if I'm looking at a play, so if my sideline's here, and if I'm marking this player and I'm shifting over here, I may be able to get this hand up better in that zone. I think that no matter what you do, if you play a great hammer thrower in a vertical sag offense, you better be ready to stop a hammer. On the other sideline, this is your same regimented mark. This is the mark that you always do in drills and you haven't adjusted anything. And you'll notice that a lot of that mark's coverage area is now right where the other defenders are. Now you're doubling up on field space. And we don't have enough coverage to be wasting it. So there's two options here on the sideline you can do to get a little bit more out of your same mark. One is you can rotate it over and guard a little bit more of the dump swing area. Now this is going to pin them more to the sideline. What's the obvious weakness? Yeah, free to huck. They're free to huck. Now I'm going to show you a defense where this is actually an advantage. But this is one thing you can do. The other thing you can do to guard more field space is you can really go straight up on that sideline as well. Lots of teams, and this is more a short-term solution, but there are a lot of teams that expect to go to the sideline and then work down that sideline. You go straight up on that sideline, now you're forcing them back to the middle of the field when they don't want to. And you would think that marking all the way straight up on the live side would be a huge disadvantage, but look what we're giving them. We're giving backhands out here. It's not like we're selling the barn here. We still can get some pressure over here, we can roll this person's coverage here, we get some dump coverage. We're getting a little bit more advantage than just rudimentary marking on the live side where you're supposed to be. Okay. Those are the things I wanted to say about some things you can do on individual marks. As far as team marking strategy, our team defense, for every team I've ever played on, starts with the mark. And the questions you need to ask yourself are, what kind of block getters do you have? The guys that are going to get your team blocks downfield. Do you have tall, strong guys? Do you have small, quick guys? Do you have just speed all over the place? Or do you have none of the above and we call those guys smart? And we want to create situations where those guys can get blocks. If you have smart folks all over the field, you don't want to be putting the other team in a foot race now, do you? You're just going to lose those situations. If your marks don't match your personnel, then your defense is working at cross purposes, and you're missing out on opportunities you could get. I can't show you how to scheme for your team, but I'm going to give you 5 examples of teams that I've been on and defenses that we've played, and defensive schemes that come from what you do on the mark. So the first defense is a way to force hucks. We're going to go into that mark where we're shutting off a lot of the lateral stuff. We're going to push to the sideline as much as we can. This defense, stress, 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 not fouling, because we want them to huck the disc. We don't want them to get 2 chances in the end zone. We want them to get 1. We want them to put it up. And then the hard part about it is that you really work hard on communicating the last back switching. If you go into this marking scheme, you can create opportunities for tall guys to get blocks over and over again. This is something I used in college at Oregon, where we had a team where nobody was that fast or that quick, but we were all 6'1" or over except for me, and it worked pretty well. We would have a guy sit in the back, and because these marks were consistent, not fouling, not giving up around breaks, we could push them to the sideline and then give them shots down the field. And this worked beautifully against teams that wanted to take those shots, which if anybody has played college ultimate, they want to. I played with a Portland club team who had a D team that was essentially 5'9" and under. Very quick though. And we found that there were a couple of ways that we could stop other teams from hucking immediately on us. Because, you know, if we didn't stop them, they would go disc to bomb, and it was a goal. It was too easy. What we want to do with this marking scheme is we're going to go into a rising pressure mark. So it's a gradient mark. When we're on their goal line, when they have 70 yards to go, we're almost completely straight up. When we're on our own goal line, we're stopping around. And it's a gradient in between there. So I'm straight up on Jeff at his own goal line, 10 yards down the field, 20 yards down the field, 30 yards down the field, and so on and so on. And we can bring the pressure up. Anybody in here had problems with their team's end zone offense? Okay, why do you have problems with your end zone offense? One reason is there's less field to work with, right? And that's what this defense takes advantage of, is you can raise the pressure by getting them into more of those situations instead of just letting them have long shot after long shot. Is this defense better than any other person-to-person defense? Maybe. But you know what it is better than? It's better than sending down 7 people in waves of 3 people, 1 person, in a completely ineffectual zone defense that leaves you matched up poorly and reeling 30 yards downfield. Everybody's played these junk zones where you just go down, you bleed yardage for about 10, 15 seconds, and then you try to scramble together some D. Where you put a rising pressure mark in, you're putting pressure on the field awareness of your marks to know where they are, so we can trust them to stop more of the around later down the field, and we can get some opportunities without going into a junk zone. Yeah?
You feel that's better than just a step change mark where you straight up until midfield or...
Okay, good question. So, if you're playing a team that's just going to go 1 to 2 to bomb, you can go straight up for 2 or 3 into a normal defense. That's what you're talking about, right? But if you're playing a team that from wherever they are on the field, they want to get into the end zone in 1 or 2 throws, this becomes more valuable because now you're stopping half of the huck halfway down the field. It also allows you to be a little bit smoother with it instead of just giving up like a quick break out of the first couple. So it could be more effective for your team. Oh, sorry, this is what I'm showing, is we just shift it. Essentially, if you want to run this defense, the very simple rule that is hard to put into practice is you put your butt towards the back cone of the end zone, no matter where you are on the field. So if you're way down in the end zone, that's pretty straight up. As you get closer and closer, you're coming over. Field awareness is important, not only on the mark, but downfield, because you have to know what to trust. And I'm sorry if this offense I'm showing up here is confusing. I've had a poorly creative moment. Okay. Compressing the field with a forced middle defense is another thing that we've used on sockeye. In this defense, we want to come for in cuts. The blocks we're trying to get are running by people on their in cuts, and we want to set up as many in cuts as we can, and that means completely shutting down the huck and giving our downfield defenders a chance to come in without being worried about that throw. Can we stop all hucks? No, but hopefully we can stop enough to give our downfield defenders chances to come in on people. We front everybody downfield, and by front I mean we're playing them for the in cut. So we might play in their back hip, but we're coming for that in move. We're not worried about as much getting faked out. And downfield, we stop continuation in two ways. The first is when the disc swings, we go straight up immediately. And then as the count gets higher and higher, we're going to go into a forced middle. So there's nothing revolutionary about that, but we really want to stop any big throw. So if somebody can wind up for a big throw, we're going to stop them, even if it's like 6 or 7 in the count, and we're going to allow our downfielders to keep coming in. The second way we're stopping continuation is first in the first second of the mark, but then by going into a forced middle, we're allowing less space in the break side so that there's less room for another break side throw and another continuation. So we're trying to limit the options where they can go side to side on the field to set up huck looks. If there's no questions about this, I'm going to be shocked, because the first time I saw this, I thought it was crazy, and it's only after watching it work a whole bunch of times that I'm convinced. Just like, the last thing is, by forcing middle, hopefully, we call this crock pot because we want to create just a stew of people in the middle of the field and force late hucks, if anything, over the middle of the stack where maybe we can get poaches in there. Yeah?
When you do a straight up force, where do you position yourself as far as you, how close to the thrower are you when you position
That's a good question. When I think about marker thrower distance, a lot of what I think about is the relative heights of the players and the reach. If you're in a mismatch where you're much shorter than the player you're guarding, I think that usually you want to back up a little bit so they can't just reach through and around you. If you're evenly matched with the person you're playing against, which I'm sure is what you're asking, usually in this kind of mark, we want to get as close as we can without fouling. If you give up fouls, you're just giving them free shots at the field, and so we want to get maybe in and then back up. We go in maybe staggered, we come back a little bit, we're still straight up, and then we're working over. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
So in this game, when the disc is in the middle of the field, where is your mark?
Oh, that's a great question. Do you guys know what mark you go into when you totally forget the force? You just try to block everything? That's usually what we do. It sets up almost like a clam look, where you have a thrower in the middle of the field, the mark's straight up, trying to get every fake that they can, and downfield people are underneath all those cutters. Do you have a question?
It was the same thing. But
Okay.
kind of, I was wondering if you had any ways for, because when I've done this before, we've had someone communicate, someone on the sideline calls the force when it gets in the middle of the field.
Gotcha.
Saying, home or away, just so people know. I'm wondering if that.
Right. So we're really trying to create situations where they're throwing to an in-cutter whose defender knows that throw is coming. So when we go straight up in the middle of the field, what we're hoping to force is wide throws to in-cutters that maybe we can tee off on it. So it's not the worst thing in the world that we don't have a force. And to be totally honest, in practice, the force is completely screwed anyway. Yeah.
What type of characteristics of your defense would work with this? Like you were saying, short and speedy, or like...
Yeah, so hopefully we're stopping all hucks with the mark. One reason is you have really fast guys downfield that you want to be running on in cuts. The other reason is you don't think you could stop the huck downfield even if they did put it up. So we want to stop the huck at the point of attack and maybe let smaller, faster guys come in on those in cuts. I think we stole this from the revolver chaos type teams in the Bay Area, who typically, in the past at least, have seemed to judge their strategies based on what would beat Jam, their closest rival, and Jam's always taller and faster. Chaos is always smaller and quicker. And so this is one thing they can do, is instead of being afraid of hucks all the time downfield and giving up big yardage, they can try to stop at the point of attack, put more pressure on throwers, see if they can get those in cuts. Yeah?
Do you abandon that when they get close to the end zone?
No. To be totally honest, teams score. And we're running this against a team that we think we will win every game if we can score 40% of our defense. We'll win every game there. If we can, I think 30% is usually our goal. So that's maybe 40 or 50% of the time they're going to score in one possession, which, correct me if I'm wrong, is roughly equal to very good ultimate. And please correct me if I'm badly wrong. Okay. So a couple years ago, I coached a Seattle youth team against the Amherst boys at the YCC championship. Going into this tournament, we knew that Amherst was going to be the team to beat, and we also knew that we had no chance of stopping their cutters. Some of you guys played with Darden. We couldn't match up with that guy. We couldn't match up with Christian. We couldn't match up with any of these guys. They were just going to run by our people. So what we wanted to set up was a chaotic defensive scheme where maybe we could break them out of their timing, because if we let them go with their timing, they were going to score every time. If we tried to, pardon the expression, but just man up and be faster, we're going to go down in flames. So what we set up was a 6-inch mark, and this was inspired by the Stanford Stanford men's team of 2002, who had an amazing marking set. But the 6-inch mark for us was you go straight up, and then if you want to force forehand, you go 6 inches over to force that forehand. And now we're trying to react to everything. And what we're trying to get is we're trying to make the thrower pivot as many times as possible. Why do we want pivots? We want pivots because we think that the more that thrower has to move, the less he's going to be able to hit this cut, and the more they're going to have to settle for that cut, forcing them a little bit wider and a little bit farther in, creating more situations where they have to go through their resets, or more situations where they have the disc on the sideline. Now we're still in our 6-inch mark. We're really jumping around the mark and making defensive fakes. And so when they do run a cut in here, even if we can't stop it downfield, we might be able to fire somebody over on the mark to just stop the play altogether, or rarely, but it'd be huge to get a block, or fire somebody in from the stack and get one of those poaches. If you have good poachers, jumping around on the mark a lot can allow them to work without the thrower seeing them. Very good throwers are going to find poaches if they don't have anything else to worry about. This is a little bit counterintuitive because you think, well, if you have a poacher on one side of the field, you want to be sure that the disc doesn't go on the other side of the field. But we found that by making more weird stuff happen, you can actually free space up for your poachers to work in where they won't be caught. So we're trying to disrupt the timing of a mechanical and very good offense with what we're doing on the mark. Yeah?
I played a few points that game, and I specifically remember, I was pretty junior, I was from sophomore, but, I just remember, I was having to think so much about the force that throw that it threw up our dumps a lot. And, we usually are pretty consistent on our dumps with the swing, too. I just remember, it specifically was throwing that off.
Well, hopefully it was something about this that was working. Thank you. The other thing that, beyond making the dumps harder, is that hopefully by getting really straight up and forcing throws out wider, we're making you go through that dump set. Maybe, instead of getting 15-yard gainers, if you're getting 10-yard gainers, now you have to, throw a third more dumps. I'm afraid I screwed up that math as well. But trying to raise the number of dumps you actually have to throw.
Yeah, one question.
Yeah.
Do you find you're weaker on the break side on this? So, because if you're sort of over pursuing on all the marks, but I guess as a thrower,
For sure.
I'd want to move that guy and take the really shallow shot, essentially for the better part of Valor, trying to move up the break side later on.
For sure.
And I don't know if that's
You're exactly right. This weakens you on the break side. You don't have as solid of a force. Two things. One is, against this team we knew we were going to play, we knew that they just crushed people on the live side.
Right.
Speed and timing and power. So we had to make them do something different.
Yep.
The other thing is that, what's the other thing? No, that was it. We're going to do something different of what they wanted to do. Oh, no, actually, the other thing is something I want to talk about in just a little bit when I talk about, actually, flat stack is what I'm going to talk about now. In a vertical stack, these boxes are zones where essentially the offense is going to be attacking. So there's a break side and there's a live side. And when we run our normal mark, we're covering a lot of one of those zones. Good?
Yep.
Yes.
Got it.
If the offense comes out in a flat stack look, 3 handlers, 4 downfield, lots of people are running this now. There's 2 basic zones where they're trying to cut, or at least I'm in large part speaking about Furious's offense because it's the offense I know the best. I promise you I know it better than our offense. So in these 2 zones, if we run our normal mark, we're covering, 30-ish% of that in zone and some of the out zone. Well, one thing we can do is we can get more straight up, and we can cover more of those zones. The other thing that we can do, and this is a great adjustment to make because, and it just kills me to watch this, especially in college games. This guy right here, if you run a normal mark, can cut dead side, where he's going to have continue options and all that. He can cut dead side without ever getting into the dead side. They can throw straight up the field to a player going to the dead side. And that's a killer of a first shot. You are allowing them to catch it going into flow without having to beat someone. And the alternative is this defender could roll totally under, and now you're exposed deep. But by marking normal, you're giving up just too valuable a piece of property. So we can roll that coverage over. And the thing that we've really worked on is over pursuing mark that I think we can represent better like this. It's weaker against any given throw. The reason is we think very good players are going to break us eventually anyway. You guard a Crookshank or a Lugston or a Mike Grant, they're going to break you. And if you just guard one swath of the field, well, they can break you there and you haven't taken anything else from them. So what we do is we try to cover any given area weaker and cover more areas a little bit. So instead of going 100, we're going, 100, 80, 60, 40, 20, and trying to get more of the field with some pressure. A couple reasons for this. One is, in a vertical stack, if you bite over to the live side, what happens? The player just takes it and throws it off to the dead side, throws it out in front of some player, they get it and they're off and running. If you do that in a flat stack, if you bite over to the live side, this player now not only has to pivot and look for something on the dead side, they have to have a cut set up. Somebody has to already be moving there. So instead of just one part of coordination, now they need 2 parts. There's something else that has to happen. So maybe, say that happens 50% of the time, there's actually a cut ready. Now you're only getting beat half the times you bite. It's more valuable to bite over and put pressure on the live side. And that's what this mark means. The last thing is that if you just mark here, you are ignoring a contribution that one of your defenders can make. And because this offense puts people in both wing zones, we can use those zones of coverage to give us a little bit more help on the mark. We think that even with a good pressure D on that dump, that this player is still valuable a little bit into that lane, and this makes our mark where we're not guarding anything as much, but more things a little more valuable. How are we doing with that? You don't have to accept it, but do you understand what I'm trying to get at?
A common way that teams that played on have defended that is to stick with, say, an open side mark, or whichever side your side is your live side, and have the wing defender come out, make a semi-cup out of it. That way you almost have 2 markers, and you leave somebody open because obviously a flat stack is a lot weaker when the disc is on the sideline. How do you think that plays into this, where you have 2 guys out there in the throwing lanes?
Okay, so when I describe these players giving some coverage here, if I was trying to put them in the throwing lanes, what we call a dive, I would be putting them here, and you'd see the circle way into this field.
Right.
Trying not to get caught in that no man's land where they're not really guarding the lane and not really guarding the dump.
Absolutely.
This is what I envision of a player guarding the dump who's still defensively faking out a little bit. he's giving a little bit of coverage to that side.
So it's almost like making the thrower think twice, that guy might be biting out at that time, which might, say, slow down the thrower's process.
I think a good way to think about it is in a flat stack, if I'm that middle handler, I don't feel like I can stretch and throw like kind of a puffball backhand out in that space where I could in a vertical stack.
Right.
Now I know that if I throw a puffball, that guy's just going to catch it. And I think that's the coverage I'm looking at there. If they can be going in and out and putting pressure and making it variable, making it hard to predict where they're going to be, that's a bonus. But I think you get this coverage, and you can use it as long as you go a little bit straighter up in the mark and a little bit more pursuit. Yeah. Thank you.
Let's say that shifts over to the sideline, the mark then straight up or to the side.
Shifts over to a sideline. If this just comes over to the sideline, we almost never want to pull this player off because we want to not allow the throw right back to the middle. We feel like this offense is weaker coming from the sideline. A lot of times what we do is what I was talking about before and what you brought up is marking more towards the middle. Our key in this defense is winning the middle of the field, not necessarily because that's where the best options are from the handlers, but that's where the best options are from downfielders to other downfielders. So even if we have downfielders catching it on the line, A, that can be a tough reset, and B, they don't have as many options. What we essentially want to do is we want to keep Mike Grant and Andrew Luxon from catching it in the middle of the field and eating us alive, which they will unless you do something. Yeah?
Do you think it's more worth your while to become pretty good at a handful of these things and then tailor that to what your opponent likes to do, or have one or two of them that play into your strengths better?
Oh, that's a great question. If I were on a very good team, I would pick one or two and try to play to my own strength. If I were on a team that were trying to say, make college regionals, or get out of the college region, or make club regionals, something like that, I might go a little bit more varied and try to have more tools that don't have to work as well. But I guess you could argue the other way as well. That's a really good question.
Well, like I was thinking, like we have a lot of new players, and so is it better, like in terms of time, just like to teach a bunch of different concepts and not be as good at each one, or?
It's interesting. I've never played on a team or coached a team that's run more than, I'd say, 1.5 to 2 of these well. So you're not going to learn 5, that's for sure. But you might learn 2. At Oregon, it was very dumb players. We had one, it never changed. If we played a team that was good at it, we usually lost. But we didn't play very many teams that were good at it. So that's a good question. Let's think about that some more. I like that. I'm going to finish up with the things I would be picking out to improve both in individual marking and team marking. Individual marking, the first thing, coming back to first principles, you got to be in shape. If you're taking a break on the mark, you're killing your team, bar none. You have the most defensive power there, and if that's your rest, then you are giving up all kinds of opportunities to create blocks. Stats and video, and something that I call grade outs. When you play a defensive point, you come off after that point, and what do good defenders usually do? They come off that point, I should have blocked that throw. He threw it, and right? That's mental time that you can use to grade out what you did and how you could have done something better. So instead of that, if you can get players coming off the field like, I had 3 marks, and one of them went for a productive throw on this guy. Now you're just using those 2 or 3 seconds to grade yourself on your marks. Usually we only talk about grading out, and people only remember their blocks or their near blocks. But if you can grade out on your marks as well, not for point blocks, but for where the disc went after your guy caught it, you can start to influence that. You can start to really play in the points to getting better marks. And so I think using those 3 seconds to grade yourself on your marks is a big deal. Yeah?
On individual marks, where are you looking? You're looking at your head, your eyes, shoulder, chest?
Oh, that's a great question. I didn't cover that because there's so many good answers. I tend to look at eyes, but I like trying to catch people on eye fakes. Good eye fakers love it when you look at their eyes. I don't think there's as good of an answer to that as what works for you against a given player, and that's more in the category of who are you playing against. I'm sorry, I can't answer that better. Yeah.
What kind of stats do you use?
Okay, stats. If you are just looking at turnovers, you're not going to have a huge sample set, because not many times you're going to actually force a turnover. The two things I like are, and that are simple, are the yardage of the person's throw, upfield. If they were throwing upfield for 10 yards on average, it's much better than if you're making them dump often. That especially works for when you're trying to run a defense where you're trying to eliminate hucks at the point of attack, because then if they throw a 70-yard bomb, it kills your stat. The other thing that I like is, and this is tough to do, but we've done it with video, and only going back with video, is if I'm marking Jeff and he throws to Devin, how many yards does Devin get? And I think that might be the one. It's so hard to do to go back in video and see it, but if Jeff is setting up Devin for yardage, that's a big deal. If Jeff is setting up Devin for dumps and he's stuck, that might be the one to take. Play pickup ultimate. If you want to try something that I said, you're not going to try it on your competitive team, or you're going to try it once, it won't work, and you'll get yelled at, and you'll never do it again. If you want to try something, go play bad ultimate and try it. And that's where you can work on the footwork and see if you can get, the best player at the company pickup to throw a turnover on this. That's where you can try things. And visualization. This is a sockeye specific problem. I'm sure other teams have it, but we had to battle this so hard on sockeye, is that we had a host of defenders that all thought that their guy should never touch the disc ever. And so every time they thought of marking, it was as a mistake. He got the disc. Darn it. Instead of, he got the disc, now I can unload on this guy. He is teed up and ready. I'm going to make him do something he doesn't want to do. Visualizing marking as less like you're a defensive back in football and you just gave up a catch, and more like you're playing basketball and the guy caught the ball. He's going to catch the ball sometime. It's basketball. He can. Treat it like, what are you going to do with your on-ball defense? What are you going to do with your on-the-disc defense? From a team perspective, I think planning out your defensive strategy is huge. Obviously, I think your three questions are, how does your defense work now? Which is probably the hardest one for you to answer, because you know about, Jimmy was really fast and Rebecca skies people. Go find somebody you play against often and buddy up to them and see what they think of your defense. That's how you're really going to get an answer. How does your defense work now? How do you want to get your blocks? And then how can you create those situations with your mark? If you can get a defensive scheme that answers those questions, you can probably do a lot on defense that you weren't doing before. Drill small skills. So if you want people to be able to stop the continue, get down into the defensive stance with some footwork, and then reel in with a staggered footwork, you have to drill that. You don't have to drill it long. I mean, maybe you do that, everybody gets 4 reps, one practice, 4 reps the second practice, and then the third practice, you do, everybody gets 6 reps, and the last 3 are actually throwing a disc to that person. Now you're putting visualization into people's bodies, you're playing instinctively. And we want to practice to play, not to think. These are tons of decisions that you could make on the mark, and you're not going to make any of them actually in a game. If you can practice to make those decisions, you can actually get something out of it. I think, again, team marking, stats, and video is huge. And maybe the last one is selection. If you've ever been a coach of a team, you've probably gone to a tournament, put out a good defensive 7, and then by the end of that tournament, instead of putting out a good defensive 7, you're starting to put out 7 block getters. You're starting to lose those good marks because you're putting out guys that might, he might get the block and he might get the block. But you're not setting them up. It's like putting in a whole bunch of big men in basketball and nobody that can pass. These marks can be our passes to increase how many blocks we can get. If you don't put people in the game that mark well, and I'm not talking about point blocks, I'm talking about they mark people, they make the disc go backwards, they shut down areas they need to shut down. If you don't put those people in the game, you're not going to get blocks from it. And I think that a lot of us do this. I know I've been guilty of this more times than I could possibly count. Get people in the game that mark well. Just to finish up, a ton of people to thank. This Northwest, UCPC, and Ultimate Camp Northwest.